Welcome to another segment of Live from Forum 2022. I'm your host, Ron Painter. We are at Forum 2022, powered by the National Association of Workforce Boards, and we've got a great lineup of folks that we're going to be chatting with, and I am really excited to talk to David Faro, who is the manager of Workforce and Business Development for the National Restaurant Association. And David, as you look, food is important to me.
Thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your background. You are originally from kind of close to my heart. You're from farm country.
I did grow up in farm country. I grew up in farm country in Canada. So if you went to North Dakota and took a look around, you'd see a sort of similar place. But I also grew up in a very, very hospitable environment. I think that the Midwest and farm country teaches people how to be hospitable around food. And so that's always been something that's just been part of my DNA. But I was lucky enough to come down to the United States shortly after high school. And I injected myself directly into hospitality for a whole bunch of reasons. And 30 years later, here I am, a hospitality career path from beginning to end. And it's taken me all over the world. It's given me great adventures. I have a family. And so I'm a real champion and evangelist for a hospitality career path.
I always find it interesting, having grown up in a family that were farmers. My grandparents, my uncles were dairy farmers. Understanding where that food on the table came from. It's kind of interesting to understand, at least to me, how hard it is, how hard farmers work to bring that product to the table.
Yeah.
Talk about the National Restaurant Association. We have a general idea of what associations do, but talk about what NRA does and who belongs to NRA.
So the National Restaurant Association is sort of the flagship association for restaurants across the country, and the pie graph of who are members of the National Restaurant Association goes all the way from corporate interests right down to your mom and pop restaurants. My role in the National Restaurant Association is a real people-centered role. As everybody is aware, our industry was hit pretty hard by the pandemic. Pretty hard would probably be an understatement. And so right now there are literally thousands and thousands of hospitality jobs across the country. My role is to help change the narrative on some aspects of the workforce development inside of hospitality career pathways. And one of the ways that the NRA has given me resources to do that is we've really been able to put together our career pathways in a way that we can illustrate to the national workforce community, and at the same time show that a career path in hospitality can bring you to where I am today, along with a lot of my other colleagues. That's what the National Restaurant Association is really heavily focused on. And I'll add, because our members are telling us right now that recruitment is their number one issue.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, it is in a sense, because if you walk around Washington, D.C., having been in town on occasion, I mean, when you walk around, you see the vacant, and you start, at least to me, oh, this restaurant used to be there or that one. Are we in a period where there's kind of a reset, that there's a tremendous opportunity for people to get into the business?
Absolutely. And so, not being an economist for the NRA, what I would say is I am someone who has sort of his finger on different areas. And right now, there has never been a better chance to re-describe the narrative around our industry. There's never been a better chance for people to get into the industry and move quickly. Right. So I was talking with one of our operators just recently and asked if my son wants to be part of this industry. And I want to encourage him to do that because he's passionate about it. When can I also tell my son, instead of going to a 4-year college or whatever it is, when is he going to have a professional level position? And we're talking 4 or 5 years at this point, and that's available in just about every state in the country.
So when the rest of the world is starting to discover skills and competency, it's been a trademark of the industry for a while.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, as someone who's come up through the industry, those skills and competencies have come to us really through on-the-job learning. I learned how to do what I'm doing by showing up and working hard and having mentors, right? The NRA has formalized that. We now have the certified restaurant professionals.
Yeah, talk about the certification.
Yeah.
What does it cover?
So it covers the competencies that are required to be a certified restaurant professional, meaning that when I ran a $5 million steakhouse, if someone came, now knowing what I know about certified restaurant professional, if you slid that credential across the table to me, and our operators are aware of these credentials, and even more so as we continue to market them, the interview would have been over. You would have been in, and I would have known that you had the core competencies to be a strong player and that you were ready to start looking at supervisor. And if that's something you wanted to do, we would move you directly into the certified supervisor role, right up to manager. The reason I think we've done this is because I mentioned earlier some of the mentors who are in this crowd for me. When I first started talking to them as a director of education, coming from an operational background, I don't have a degree in pedagogy or any of that, but I've gotten one from the industry, right? What I was instructed to do was to find ways to share these pathways with the workforce development system. And so over the last number of years, we've done that, and we have some really, really great pathways that we can put workers on, but that also help employers bring their people through that. And it's also the RTI for our apprenticeships as well.
David, is there, I think for many people, when they think about the restaurant industry, they think like, nah, dead end. That's where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Talk about the things like you've been a part of the industry, and I think workforce development professionals, at least I hope, when they see a business, they see more than what the average person does. We do see, oh, you can move here. Where talk about opportunity in the restaurant industry. You mentioned if your son comes into it, if my son comes into it, like what are they going to learn? Where can they go?
So I would say the first opportunity starts with exactly my son, right? When my son is entering the workforce, for decades, hospitality has taught him the power skills that enable him to succeed in hospitality if that's the direction he chooses to go. But we also give those power skills that enable people to succeed in all of the other industries. Something I often say is if I have someone come into my house to perform service on my laundry machine or something, I recognize whether that person has a hospitality background because they have some of those power skills that I spent decades trying to teach to kids like my son. So that's one reason why I think workforce development should really think about looking at our industry. But in terms of opportunity to move forward into higher, we hear all the time, high wage, high demand. That exists in our industry across the country. And I think people when I hear people say, I don't want to go into hospitality, we're one of the largest employers in the country, and I know a lot of people who are super happy that they made that decision. So I think looking from the outside in, what I'm trying to say is that I'm probably not built to be a welder, and that's okay. So I'm okay saying to some people, you're right. You should probably look at a different career path. But the thing about hospitality is that window for people to find a place, right? I need accountants in hospitality. I need facilities managers. We're working on a facilities manager apprenticeship right now for hospitality. So I think the problem is when people say, I'm not into hospitality, they're thinking dishwasher, they're thinking entry level. Well, in every industry you enter at the entry level, you find your place, and then you're allowed to grow. For me, that meant visiting 153 countries. That means serving heads of state around the world. That means going to Antarctica 5 times, all on hospitality's dime, being paid for it. And so not everybody takes the adventure path that I took, but there's a path for everybody in hospitality.
David, I've certainly not done the international travel you have, but the perception to me is that somehow in the States, servers, attendants, we look at that as, if they're not doing anything else. But in Europe, it's a profession. There are generations of servers and very proud to be a part of that industry. What's sort of the cultural difference between how we see it and how others see it?
So my first answer to that is, I opened a restaurant in Olympia, Washington. 4 of my nephews and nieces have worked there. The general manager has been there for almost 20 years. You see what I'm saying? We do have that in America. You can go to many restaurants in Washington, D.C. and find a generational path through that restaurant. When we're talking about sort of the disposition, looking at the European butler, again, I'm not a sociologist, so I can't comment on it too much, but I have worked with a lot of Europeans. We also feel differently about food than they do. We also feel differently about a lot of cultural differences. This is where I think that the cultural difference is coming into clear focus now. They also had wage structures that allowed them to be professional and to move forward. Our industry is looking at that right now, and I think that once my son realizes and that narrative is gone, because it's not a true narrative that he can't earn a professional wage, right? Then I think culture will come along. But my parents didn't say to me go into hospitality when I was in first grade, but they sure are proud that I did now.
David, you mentioned wages. Industries right now are scrambling to find employees. I think it's a time of internal look in companies and maybe industries. Same happening to the restaurant industry?
Yeah, again, I don't want to talk too much about that huge ball of wax, but you just nailed it. Everybody's thinking about it. And this is a free country and anybody can work where they want. So that is part of the package, right? What does it mean to go work in Grays Harbor County, Washington? Right? What kind of life am I going to be able to have? Those questions are forefront, not just in our industry, but in every industry. And as we've all seen on the media, our industry is taking a real close look at that, and we know that's part of the equation.
You mentioned took a big hit during the pandemic. Again, we're coming back to restaurants. We're going back out to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, the data that I showed in the workshop yesterday shows that we're not quite back to pre-pandemic levels, but it's moving that direction. When we see the churn in our industry and the workforce, the numbers sort of indicate not that people are leaving, but that people are moving around, right? So to me, that's an indication of an industry stabilizing itself. I moved from my position at the beginning of the pandemic, so this whole sort of, I don't know what the term they're using for it, but the churn, right?
It's a good definition.
It's a churn that's staying within the industry according to our last report, right? So I think that, I think the industry is completely resetting itself right now because we had nobody show up for a couple of years, right? So it gave us some time to think.
Cool. David, if I want to learn more about the National Restaurant Association, how do I do that?
What I would love for particularly people who might have attended DavidTheForum is to check out Serve Success and that platform, because that's really the platform I'm trying to bring to the Workforce Development Councils. And so check out our credentials, and they can get in touch with me at any time, and I'd love to talk about it with them as well.
Because there are a whole lot of your industry folks who proudly check for that certification.
Absolutely.
Who want that certification.
Absolutely, because right now the answer to your question is yes.
David Faro from the National Restaurant Association. David, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And thanks for all of you joining me. Again, I'm Ron Painter, your host. We've been talking live from Forum 2022. Hope you'll join us for another segment of conversation.